All right, let's have our seats. We're all ready to go. Thank you, Zach, for the prelude music. My name is Bryant Jensen. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Teacher Education, and we're really glad to have Dr. Gallimore here. I will introduce him a little bit more. I felt like we should have a full BYU experience for him. This is Dr. Gallimore's first time in Utah and first time at BYU, and so it's been great visiting with him here on campus the last couple days, and I'm really excited for his presentation and excited for you to learn with him and with together. So we will start with an opening hymn. Zach Weingartner from Bakersfield, California is tickling the ivories over there. And does someone want to lead the music? What's your name? Allie Smith will lead. And where are you from, Allie? From Kaysville, Utah. And then we'll have an opening prayer from Hannah Hamilton from Greensboro, North Carolina.
Dear Heavenly Father, we are very grateful for this opportunity to hear from Dr. Gallimore, and we pray that we might be able to listen and to learn from his lecture, and that we might be able to apply it to our future teaching as well as to our lives now. Father, we love thee and are grateful again for this opportunity, and pray that we might be able to look for opportunities around us, to serve those around us, and to bless the lives of those that we can reach out to. And these things we pray for in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen.
Thank you. Dr. Ronald Gallimore is a distinguished professor emeritus at UCLA, where he worked for over 40 years. He is also an affiliated professor currently in psychology and education at the University of Delaware, where he lives now. His research addresses the improvement of teaching and cultural and behavioral change. He has authored 4 books and over 140 journal articles and chapters. He co-founded the KEEP project in Hawaii, the Kamehameha Elementary Education Project, which was a lab school for Native Hawaiian students from 1969 to 1980. And in the 90s, he co-founded Lesson Lab, which was associated with Pearson's independent research arm, and that was used in working with hundreds of teachers and schools from across the country to improve data-driven decision-making to improve teaching and learning. He co-directed a large video study, the TIMS video study, which was carried out in 7 countries, a study of math and science teaching quality. That was from 1997 to 2007, and at UCLA, one of the last major projects he worked on was the Latino Homeschool Project, which looked at cultural issues, literacy issues, and that was funded by NIH from 1994 to 2005. His book, Rousing Minds to Life, which I endorse strongly, won the Grawemeyer Award in Education in 1993. I'm hard-pressed, on a more personal note, to think of a human being who's more generous, engaging, and engaged than Dr. Gallimore. I've been reading his stuff since I was your age, and he was a mentor to some of my mentors, and I learned a lot from him in our visit here. And a couple years ago, I spent a whole day in Delaware, and he drove me around, and we talked about research and teaching improvement, and spent about 13 hours together. He's incredibly generous, and I'm also hard-pressed to think of a human being who lives his principles of excellent teaching in every interaction. Those of you who know anything about Lev Vygotsky, for example, that has inspired a lot of Dr. Gallimore's work. As we were leaving my office just now, he wanted to take a picture of me next to a poster for this presentation. I said, "Don't you have the PDF for this?" He said, "Yes, but I need to have a picture of the context in which the poster is presented." And that's a very Vygotskian way of thinking, and just reminded me of this idea that he lives the principles that he espouses in his teaching. So let's give Dr. Gallimore a warm round of applause.
Thank you, Brian, and everyone for the warm greeting and the generous comments. I wanted to tell you, though, I didn't come from a place like UCLA and Westwood in Southern California. I was born on a rented farm in a log house off the electric grid with no indoor plumbing, and lived there until I was 13. I was the third in my family to even attend high school and graduate, the first to go to college, and the only one so far to get a PhD. How did that happen? I'm still trying to figure it out. I think about it, but the real answer is because of people now long gone who are the ones that you will be replacing. Teachers saved me from a life very different from the one that I would have had if they had not intervened in my life and showed me that there was more than working the rest of my life on a small farm without a life of the mind. And that turns out to be the most precious gift of all. I might also tell you that in those years, I attended a small Methodist church that was smaller than this room, just to put things in perspective. Okay, so I'm going to take you through a psychological experience. I'm going to first talk optimistically about this topic. I'm going to share, I hope, which is your enduring optimism about what you're going to do with your lives as educators. Then I'm going to depress you and make you so pessimistic you'll be sorry you ever heard of me. And then I'm going to bring you back. Because I've been doing this kind of work for over 50 years, and I've been one of those kind of professors who spent half the time in a lab at the university and the other half out in the community in schools and other institutions, including issues to do with healthcare, mental health delivery. So not just schools, but a lot of school stuff. So that bouncing back and forth is what has led me to be able to confront the pessimism that I often had to deal with in the frustrating effort to bring meaningful change in the way teaching and instruction is delivered. And yet it gave me the optimism to keep going. So hopefully you'll walk out of here thinking it's going to be hard, but it'll be worth the journey, okay? Now, you know, the big story in making changes in education has been pretty discouraging. But I say it depends on the lens you use. Right, if you use a very long, wide lens, you say there's huge changes been made. School rooms today don't look anything like they did at the turn of the 20th century. In fact, I hate to tell you that the school, my first grade room, didn't look much different than the one on the right here. It was maybe a little fewer students, but it was basically that, all lined up, pretty drab, and the instruction was pretty limited in the experience. So we have had changes. And I could tell you stories like 1850, a Massachusetts school board needed to cut the budget substantially. And the solution was they did not renew the contracts of all the current teachers who were male, and they hired all female teachers for the next year who could be got at a third of the cost of the male teachers. I don't think you all would think that was likely today. I hope not. Until very recently, most people in this country didn't even go to high school. When I was a boy, during World War II, most people didn't graduate. And very few people went to college. That's all changed. So in the long term, there have been a lot of changes. And obviously, you know from your education, a lot of other improvements and qualities going on. But unfortunately, in other ways, it hasn't changed very much. Brian referred to the TIMSS International Study. Okay, in the United States, we do pretty well with math instruction, but if you look at the international scores, we score very low compared to other countries. Japan, Netherlands, Czech Republic, Hong Kong, they all do better than us. Even Australia does better. And so this study was done to try to get some ideas about, well, what are they doing in their math instruction we're not doing? So imagine what the Mars rover, right? We send this rover all over the world, 7 different countries. We send a trained videographer. We do a nationally random selection of 8th grade math classes. If you're teaching 8th grade math in 2000, you had an equal shot of being asked to let us come in and shoot one lesson. We did this in the United States, and we managed to do that. Now, what we were trying to do is say, well, are there some clues here? What are they doing? Why are they doing so much better than we are? Well, there's a lot of complications here, but let me keep it simple. In these other countries, every week, somewhere in the lesson cycle, they slow the lesson down, very slow, and they spend a lot of time on a few problems. And they work it until the children, the students, understand what it is the procedure they're learning is doing mathematically. I'll give you an example. Multiplying fractions. If you multiply a whole number, you get more. If you multiply a fraction, you get less. In those countries, they slow it down till the students understand why that paradox happens. And they can understand it and at least explain it in the language of their age. How many times did that happen in the American 8th grade lessons? 0. 0. There was never any time devoted to anything but learning, memorizing, and practicing procedures. First you add this, then you subtract that, and then you divide that, and then you do it over and over again until you can do it automatically, but you have no idea what you're doing. Remember, this study was done in 2000. So after all the massive billions of dollars spent in this country since World War II to improve the quality of math instruction, there have been enormous efforts. The new math program of the 60s in the aftermath of Sputnik, the more recent effort to improve math teaching standards, all of this. requiring teachers to have more math in their undergraduate preparation seems to have had no impact on something like this, which appears to be a key reason these other countries do better. So, now, let me now switch to a little story about the improvement efforts I began back in the 1960s. So I'm going to kind of run through this a little fast. When I was a very young professor, I got a chance to go to Hawaii, live in a native Hawaiian community for 2 years, and study family, child development, and what was going on in the schools. And what we found was the same kind of thing that you find in the United States. A lot of kids from backgrounds like the native Hawaiians are not doing very well in school. And by the way, the photo there at the bottom is your young speaker there in his army uniform, digging a earthen oven to cook a pig for the first birthday of my firstborn child. So this is the kind of thing I did for 2 years. Lived in that community and learned how Hawaiians live. Okay, the first effort to improve teaching, I got at the foundation to help build a lab school. This is a picture of the lab school, and this is a picture of the interior. This is early 70s. And the native Hawaiian kids didn't learn to read. By the 5th grade, they're reading at the first grade level. So what we worked on was trying to find a way to teach reading in a way that was built on the strengths that they brought from their homes. Native Americans, like every other culture and every other families in every other culture, they have their strengths, and one of the things among these for these kids is they grow up with lots of siblings, and so they learn to work in groups. They also learn to do a lot of talking with each other, and we thought this was a strength that we could build on. And we used this classroom. That's a picture from the bottom, and you can see in the background a reflection. That was an observation booth where we could sit up there and observe teaching and videotape it and do all this fancy analysis stuff. And what we discovered was if we were to incorporate some of the cultural features into teaching reading and teaching children's language development, we would redress and narrow the gap between the achievement gap, so the kids would learn to read at a more advanced level. And so we found one. I'm going to show you a little video clip illustration of one in which incorporates some of the things we learned about the culture, which was the kids are used to all talking together without the adult controlling them. And so they're used to that, and they're used to working in a group, but they all speak a dialect of English, Hawaiian Creole or Hawaiian English. It's sometimes called Pidgin English for those of you who've been to the islands. And it's understandable if you're an English speaker, but it also makes it tough for these kids because it's not academic language. So one of the things we discovered was if you let them have lots of chances to talk and the teacher controls the topic and lets the kids control the turns, which is what they're used to doing in the sibling group, then you create some teachable moments. So now Professor Bryant is going to give you some clues on what to look for in this video. Because you might think, wow, this is just a lot of noise going on here, but nothing's happening instructionally. But this happens to be one of his specialties, seeing more to see in videotapes. Please, Professor.
Well, there's a big expectation now. I watched this video an hour ago. So maybe 3 questions for you to look for while you observe and take notes during this short clip. How, one, does the teacher respond to students' sort of everyday language, like their familiar language, like you said, the Hawaiian English language? 2, how does she expand their language repertoire to learn new things linguistically? And 3, how, as Dr. Gallimore mentioned, how is control handled? who controls what between the teacher and the children. Okay? Let it play.
We're going to make our peanut butter sandwich. What is the first thing I'm going to need?
Get the bread.
I need to get a
You
piece
hear?
of bread or a slice of bread. What am
I
I going
know
to
how
do
to
with
make
it?
this. I'll put this first and put this second.
Okay, I'm going to start it
Put
over.
it.
Get the
Okay,
bread.
here's the easy way to do that.
So let's try to listen and get it close there. Okay, everyone ready?
We're going to make our peanut butter sandwich. What is the first thing I'm going to need?
Get the bread.
I need to get a piece of bread or a slice of bread. What am
I
I
know
going to
how
do
to
with
make
it?
this. I'll put this first and put this second. Oh yeah.
Put it?
Get the
Where did I put it,
bread
James
first.
K?
No, get this knife first. Put that under. Put that jelly on the sandwich and then on the sandwich. Then you eat. Put that.
I put the jelly on top of the sandwich like this?
No, you open it. Then you put it on this stuff.
Oh, I need to twist the lid off the jar?
Yeah, and make like that and put it on the. First, you have to do peanut butter.
First, I have to do the peanut
that.
butter. I have to spread the peanut butter first?
Yeah,
Are you sure?
Yeah, because I tried it. That's like that's the way I have to do it.
Okay.
Everybody's looking.
How do I spread it? Do I just take my finger and stick it in and rub it all over the bread?
No, this just stick that in there
You stick the knife into the jar? Okay.
and spread.
Okay, there. It's spread. What do I have to do?
Just gotta mix them around.
I have to spread it around on the top of the bread with the knife.
Because we saw you guys when we was in there. That was
Okay.
green good.
All right, now I've spread my peanut butter all over my bread. Now what do I do?
Put the jelly.
Put the jelly. Oh, I just pour it like
No,
this.
I washed that and you put the jelly in.
Oh, I put the knife into the jelly jar?
No, you put it mix up.
Oh, I'm going to mix it up. So how am I going to do it then? I only have one knife.
Yeah, good. You gotta
What do
wash
I
it
do?
off and
I have to wash it off. Can I wash it off with just
He
a
wants to eat that.
napkin or can I wipe it off? Wipe it off.
Okay, we can stop.
So that I
Okay, so the boy's name was Eldon. He's very popular.
Say that.
The boy's name was Eldon. Everybody loves Eldon. So, okay, you saw that, right? So she never corrected him, but when he said, rub it off or you got to wash it off, she starts introducing another lexical term, wipe it off. There are other lessons I remember. The child might say, the guys that drive the plane, and the teacher would say pilot every time. And then by the end of the lesson, 20 minutes later, the kids are all using pilot. And they didn't know, they just had a language lesson, right? So, okay, now, the point of showing this charming thing and this charming teacher is, by the time we did the research in the lab school, we had a whole repertoire of fantastic things we knew produced great gains in language development. So these kids came out of third grade, these were kindergartners, these kids came out of third grade speaking standard English and the dialect. They didn't lose their dialect, but they mastered academic language and they were reading on grade level. But we had a bunch of other things that we had learned to do in the lab school. So the next step was I left Hawaii and went to UCLA, and my graduate students and I started working in public schools serving like 90% children of Mexican immigrants. So the idea was we'd take all this stuff, we would adapt it and start working in a much more challenging environment than a lab school, where we had a lot more control. It worked. This same stuff adapted to the new situation worked. We got same great results. It was wonderful. Are you ready now for the pessimism? It was so impractical, it was hopeless. Because the only way we could install this in was to provide a level of professional development using grant money that I got from foundations to pay graduate students and people to go out there and work in the schools. And of course, the obvious problem was, as soon as that money went away, all the good stuff we had done there went away too. So you think I was a little down in the dumps? I told Ryan this morning I still have PTSD for those years after putting in all that effort thinking I've got the magic bullet now. It's just a question of telling people about it. Telling people about it. Telling educators, policymakers, board members, teachers, telling them, yeah, it works if you have enormous resources to stay on site, but it's not going to work. So we switched directions, and I called it the pivot. And the pivot was to go from us being the change agents to recognizing that the only people who can do this are the teachers. They have to become the people who are the improvers. You can't bring it in from the outside. So what did we do? First, we recognized you can't make revolutionary changes in our school system. There's a lot of very practical reasons why. We have lots of children showing up at 7:40, 8:03, and they all come at the same time. And adults have to be there. And you have to divide them up, and you have to take them off. And that's not going to change. And they're going to be there till 2:30 or 3 o'clock. And they have to be properly supervised and cared for. That's not going to change. They have to be protected. And you have to deliver instruction. And you have to meet with parents. And you have to be on the curriculum committee and the library committee. You got to get ready for the holidays. You got to deal with all sorts of emergencies. It's a fire hose of stuff coming at you. Where in the world are teachers going to find time to be the improvers? They don't. Even today, only begun to provide time for professional learning communities, opportunities like that. That's a new thing. Some of you may even end up in schools that aren't doing anything like that. So here's what we decided to do. Using theories from psychology and cultural anthropology, we said we got to find an existing setting in the school. Okay, in elementary school, that's grade levels. In secondary, it's departments. So we started with elementaries, and we thought, how can we convert some of the time in grade level meetings into improvement time? And we picked a school that was the lowest achieving in its district. I mean, it was at the bottom. Nobody wanted to teach there. It was called dysfunctional. And of course, they're desperate, so they let a wacky faculty from UCLA come in. So one of my grad students and a postdoc and myself spent 6 years working there. School gets to the top of the heap. It's now the best school in the district. Everybody wants to work there. This is 90% Latino. 80% of the kids came to kindergarten speaking Spanish only, so it's a challenging situation. So here's how we did. First of all, we get the teachers, we get the grade levels to devote some of the grade level meetings 2, maybe a month, to working on improving things. And what was that? Even in grade levels where some of the teachers didn't like each other and they don't like working together and they have different personalities and all that, kind of stuff. What we discovered was if you could find a problem they had in their classroom right now with their students learning that was bugging the heck out of them, like maybe teaching fractions or teaching writing, something like that, something they all wanted to make better. If you could find that thing, get them to commit to work together, to find lessons and develop some lessons together that tackled a small part of the problem. And if you sustained that cycle so that they solved one and they thought, well, okay, it was worth my time. I'll do another one. By the time they'd done a few and they begin to see tangible improvements, you got them. You got them. It's amazing how you can transform a small group of people who haven't ever worked together, don't want to do it, don't like each other. But if they set and share a common goal, whether it's a basketball team, an infantry squad, a youth group in the church, if you can get people working toward a common goal, a lot of things that usually get in the way kind of drift aside for the moment, and people will begin to form a team. If you can get that, you suddenly get the little bit of incremental improvements. So we went from 1 school to 9 schools, and we replicated the same effect and produced substantial gains in reading achievement, math achievement, and then we went from that to 22 states, hundreds of districts, and thousands of teachers, and it worked. It works. In other words, my claim that it's teachers who are the change agents if they are given the circumstances to make that happen. Are you optimistic again? Do you feel power flooding into your bodies, and when you go out you're going to be able to make all these changes? Yeah, I really believe it. I believe after all these years of working on it, I really believe my mistake early on was thinking I'm going to be bringing the answer, when instead what I can do is bring some contributions to those work groups. People like me, through my publications or maybe workshops, yeah, we can bring things. Maybe we can do it now through the internet. We can provide videos, we can provide inputs, but it's really the transformation into something that affects the daily lives of students. It's only the teachers can do it. I wish I could tell you that the country has made tremendous progress toward the day when that would be the ubiquitous standard experience that you would find when you go in to your first paid job. Unfortunately, it's still inchoate. It's not a fully developed. And again, here's the challenge to you. I think it's only going to happen through the efforts of your generation. I won't be here to see it, but I think by the time your generation has got to where I am in life, I think we will have seen that transformation that is as great as the one I showed you on the first slide, from the 1900 classroom to the 2000 classroom. It'll take a century. And that's your century. And I wish I could be around to see what you all accomplish. Now, that's a little bit of an optimism thing. I'm not looking at the time here, because how much I got, a little bit of time left, because I'm going to want to leave time for questions. I want to just do a couple more quick things here. I want to show you what one of these groups looks like, although I don't think, the sound's not good enough, is it? Are you hearing this in the back? Yeah. You did? You did see it all right? Okay. Let's go ahead and try to show this one here.
You want to say something about what it is?
Okay. This is just a little example of a group of teachers that have been working together for 2 years. It's a little hard to explain the problem they're working on, but they're suddenly having a problem on their largely Latino kids are not making progress in some of their decoding in reading instruction. And watch what happens is there's no professional here. These are just the teachers in 3rd or 4th grade working together trying to figure something out, right? So you ready? No, that's not it.
That's part of the procedure
of decoding. Yes.
Of when you're, every week when you have a decodable,
That's where the list comes from.
What you do anyway.
Okay. Right. However, last year I made copies
but they get more. They need it more
So
than
they need
once.
to be pre-taught before the pre-teach for the whole group is what I'm thinking you're saying.
But also, some of the kids can't read our decodables. So last year I was making copies for everyone of remember the 2nd grade decodables? We can still do that and just, have a pre-teach. It's a lot of work.
But you're talking about the intensive kids. Remember, we're talking about strategic. Yeah.
All right, yeah, okay. But you're saying then are we pre-teaching to everyone? Well, yeah, we would.
So then are we just going to go over like decodable procedures?
Well,
Is
we
that what it
can't,
boils
because
down to?
obviously just going over the decodable procedures isn't working, or we wouldn't have this problem.
Well, how do we know that we're all doing the same procedure?
Good point.
Oh,
So maybe we
Well,
should make that our step 4.
That's a good one too. Because like today.
okay, that sounds
That's very
great.
good. Today we did Dave the.
Maybe we
Let's
can
do
make-
that.
Okay.
Since we've got 3 minutes, let's just do the decodable.
Pre-teaching. But I think
Doing decodable the way that it should be done, and Susan with go through the list in the back. What?
it's so simple now. That
I know. It's like, oh God, it just fell out.
So then maybe
Okay.
we should put, since we have like 2 minutes, next week we'll go through, if everyone can
next
bring
week
their
we do.
program appendix and we'll actually do.
Okay. Now, you think, I've shown this video to, people, like, I don't know, board members or principals, and they go, well, what's the big deal here? Well, okay, I'll tell you what the big deal is. This is exactly the kind of thing that leads to those little incremental improvements. These teachers had already solved this problem in the past. Remember when the leader, she's just one of their peer teachers, she's the designated facilitator, said, are we sure we're all doing the same thing? And they suddenly realized they're not been. Now you think, well, that seems so stupid, but no, it's not. This is actually all this little detailed stuff that you're going to be doing in your work life that makes all the world of difference in making those little incremental improvements. But just think what it took to create the setting for those teachers to meet like that, and they're in their second year of doing this, and they're deep in the second year. Remember the older teacher said, remember last year I did this? Because they had come up with this little procedure where she made copies and they all started doing it, but they forgot. And it turned out some of them weren't doing it anymore, and that's why the kids weren't making progress on a particular function that they were teaching. I think this is one of the hardest things to get across about our work is it's not spectacular, what we're talking about, the kind of process we're trying to talk about. So I know we need to close, and I would just want to close with my little asperisms of,
And I felt that I was always,
of
and I've,
little sayings that have meant a lot to me. Optimism is true moral courage. Moral courage is having the courage to do the right thing even when it's hard and other people are objecting. So that's what optimism is about, is being courageous. People may say you're being Pollyannish and foolish. Well, maybe, but it takes courage to remain optimistic. And what's the greatest act of optimism is teaching, because you will never know, in many cases, whether what you did for those students this year did anybody any good. Sometimes I hear from students I had 30 years ago. Brings tears to my eyes when they tell me these stories. But most of them I never heard from again. So I don't know. Did I do them any good? So how did I get up every day and go out and teach? Well, okay, I believed it was going to matter. And then the final thing is from the UCLA basketball coach, John Wooden. Everyone's a teacher to someone. So when you walk out this door, you're still teaching. You're teaching everybody you come across in the Walgreens or the CVS, at the grocery store. You come across the clerk that's looking like they're having a hard day, okay. Maybe just some little words you say from them, you're teaching. So anyway, let's stop. Anybody has to leave, please go. Anybody have a question, I'll stick around. Thank you.